This podcast is going to take you on a journey. It's going to provide you with some learnings, and it's going to join some dots that previously haven't been joined. The true history of this planet and what has gone on before the rise of the industrial empire and therefore the Western civilization and the narrative that has been pushed with it is coming to light. And I mean truly coming to light. This week I introduce you to Colin Hayter, who's been on a bit of a journey himself. At 62, he spent the last 7 years in deep learning, trying to understand hieroglyphs, ideograms, and he was drawn to the Gosford Glyphs. And his interpretation is very interesting. It provides us with another perspective. And the connection we made here in the refinery was something that I truly treasure, and I look forward to sitting down with him again for him to share more of his stories. However, his stories come through a tribal line. He's an uncle of the Sovereign United Tribes, and they are banding together to try and work together so we can bring this information into the light and reclaim the stories that were lost. I'm going to leave it there. The name of this one is the Bambara Incident, and all I'll give you before you start this one is the Bambara Forest is where the Gosford Glyphs are located. I'm going to go with Bathe in the Sun for the opener here, because it's a homegrown Aussie song. It's got a hell of a beat, and I'm not too sure what we'll finish with. However, enjoy Rowdy, enjoy this conversation. Look forward to the next one. Remember, unlocking the code, Instagram, Facebook, etc. Give me a follow, give me a like. If you can review, that'd be awesome, because it just helps the algorithm. And with some of the information we're learning here at Unlocking the Code lately, we need to bump that up. So please, let your friends know. Share it if you enjoy it. Comments, emails, unlockingthecode9@gmail.com. Really appreciative of the time you take to listen to this podcast. We're taking it to the next level. Thanks very much. Be kind, be cool, stay safe. Remember, team people, we're all in this big blue ball together. And we'll talk soon. Cheers.
Today I sat in a field of paper daisies. The gentle breeze made the world wave to me. The day has come with a gold ring wrapped around it. I think I might just bathe in the sun. And I hope my world don't crash in over me, just like it did yesterday. I'm pretty sure the last mirror that I crashed was more than 7 years
G'day everyone, welcome back. It's my great pleasure to introduce Colin Hayter. Is it? That's how I present your last name, mate?
Mm-hmm.
Colin Hayter to the podcast this evening. How are you, bud?
I'm very well. Very well, thank you. Thanks again for your interest in my work. And thank you very much for making this opportunity for me to be able to share today.
Mate, it's my pleasure. And
wonderful.
Yeah, we the beauties of social media, Colin, this is how we got in touch with each other. I think you saw some of my Gosford Glyph posts and bits and pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had a bit of a chat before we turn the mics on. However, where would you like to start, mate? You keep talking about the Bambara Incident, and
Yes.
I told you not to tell me until we put the mics on. So
Okay. What I'd like to share with you is really a great amount of things, but it all starts at Bambara. It all comes from Bambara. And so I'd like to explain first what Bambara is.
Yes.
And so many of us have heard also of the term the Gosford Glyphs.
Yes.
Of course, there is no glyphs in Gosford. I've never found any. So what really is this, that a site exists in a place called Carryong, which is Central Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And importantly, it's upon Garingi lands.
Garingi.
Yeah, Garingi.
Yeah.
And Garingi is Garingi, Garingi.
Mm-hmm.
Or IA, was it? So once again, we'll be talking some of the Bambara. So the Bambara is the most sacred place for traditional Australians here on the east coast of Australia, for all tribes, not just the Garingi.
Okay.
So the sacred Bambara forest exists on Garingi lands, but what's different about it was through the millenniums, the Bambara was held open for all to use.
Okay.
Which is very unusual. If you were to walk on Gomeroi lands and think you might go hunting there or something, well, you'd get speared before you made it too far up the road.
Yeah, absolutely. You need in the past, you'd have to send an envoy in to get approval to even pass through the lands or do trading or anything else like that.
Your bull roarer would do the job,
Yeah.
waving the bull roarer in the air, sticking to the paths that were the paths between lands.
Agreed, paths.
And then they know you're coming, you know. And well, you'd even do that still entering the Bambara, by the way. However, the thing was, once again, that the Bambara was held open. It was a learning, sharing place. So to understand it, let's go back, way back.
Way back.
Way back, yeah, before the time of man. Yeah, so man didn't even exist yet before the stories of Bambara have already begun. So what it was is that place there, something special there happens twice each year. On the summer solstice and on the winter solstice, the first direct westerly moving rays of the sun land smack into that district there. When the Earth spins, it doesn't just spin sideways, it's actually tilted up
Yeah, it's
somewhat.
tilted a bit, yep.
22.3 degrees
Yep.
approximately.
Yep.
And it's actually spinning up, you know. So as the Earth spins around, when we look at the Earth and the Sun belly to belly, so two balls, like two belly buttons looking at each other,
Yep.
that very closest point is lands right there in the district around Bambara. And so what it is that's the closest moving westerly rays of the Sun making landfall on Earth. So what happened there was that there's this one place there called Lion Island. You familiar with Lion Island?
No, I want you to assume. I just want you to tell your story. So
There's an island exists just offshore. Just happens to be shaped like a large lion sitting there in the bay. You know.
Yes.
Its real name is Muli Mulla, a beautiful mother in lingo from that district there. So today
it's missing its head, isn't it? The Lion Island.
Well, it doesn't have a head.
Yeah.
No. But nonetheless, it's still got a bulbous shape where a head goes. You know?
Absolutely,
It's
yeah.
very easy to imagine a sphinx sitting there. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And so Muli Mulla, once again, was its traditional name. So before the cycle of man, what was important about the island was that on its very top, so its most highest easterly point on the island, grows a large tree.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still there today, and that'll come up in the story later, but nonetheless grows a large tree on the most easterly point. So what happened there was every morning as the sun's rays come over the horizon, the first thing they hit are the highest branches in that tree. And from there, what would happen would be that the rays, the energy of the sun, the life-giving energy of the sun, so and agreeing with science tells us where life came from was the energy of the sun. So in that very place, the life-giving energy of the sun hits into the highest branches. From there goes down into the tree, down into its mighty trunk, and then down through its roots deep into earth. And so the life-giving energy of the sun coming over the horizon goes through the tree, through the trunk, and into earth, and gives birth to earth every single day. Newer life.
Newer
the
life.
Ankh, you know,
Yeah.
newer life. And so importantly, earth, the life of earth, its own life, is born through mother, as you and I are.
Absolutely, yeah.
And through Father, in the way Father is the creator in that life-giving energy, which is the sun. So once again, this is before the cycle of man. One would wonder, how can men know a story of before the cycle of man? But in cultural terms, things can be explained in the way that we've heard of the terms a clever one, a magi, and so on. And for each tribe is a different name for that fellow. So we'll use that open clause of the clever one, you know. So a magi or clever one had the ability, or does have the ability, they still exist today.
Absolutely.
To do many things. But one of their things was that they could climb an invisible tree into the sky and sit alongside the Creator and share with those great nature spirits up there. So it's from there man brought the knowledge that he could see before the time of man. And that time, Thoth talks of it well in the way that he says, before ye were men and we were gods.
Yes.
This time, you know, so going right back to Earth when it was just a ball, a lifeless ball, you know. So once again, this is the beginning of the Bambara in the way that it's not just important to humans and man, but to the earth in the way that that's where the mother gives birth to newer life every single day.
And it's interesting as well, you talk about the summer and the winter solstice alignments, Colin.
Yes.
Every megalithic site on the planet
Yes.
honours the summer and the winter solstice.
And they still work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
to
a
this
Swiss
day.
clock.
Yeah, to this day.
So there goes the theories of Earth turning upside down in the last several thousand years and so on.
Yes.
None of those things would work if
That's
they
right.
did. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's the beginning of the Bambara. So other things that's important about it are the creation stories on the east coast start very near there. So just a little bit further north, and when I say a little bit, I'm only talking 30 kilometres north, and then a little bit off to the west, comes up Mount Yango.
Yes.
And so at Mount Yango can be found there the oldest creation stories from traditional Australia carved into the rock floor at a point that's called Devil's Rock today.
Devil's Rock, okay.
And so there exists this. There's a set of carvings that are so old, and it's hard to date carvings. You know,
Absolutely.
it's almost impossible, really.
Yeah.
You know.
And that's the issue we have over this stuff. Dating stone is a very difficult.
Very difficult, yeah. It can be done under unique circumstances.
Yes.
But certainly not in environments which change greatly with a big difference between summer to winter and all this sort of thing. You know?
Yeah.
But anyway, they're ancient carvings. And so they tell of, once again, the creation story. So it goes like this. What we see there is a triangle carved into the ground and a number of figures around the triangle. And it tells this story. And what it is, it's the story of first of man. So we could say Adam and Eve, if you like, you know. And but importantly, it's not the story of their creation; it's the story of their awakening.
Okay.
And that's different, you know. When people talk about creation stories of man evolved in this country or that country or so on, Australian culture doesn't say it that way in the creation stories. They talk of where man woke up. So what happened there was. That Bayami, the energy of the sun, so that's the spirit of the sun itself.
Yes.
And so the living spirit of the sun came to earth in that place And there he woke up 2 men. So one is called Darulaman, and the other carries no name. And so he's known as the Son of Light. So 2 twins, or 2 brothers, but we see them as twins.
You could say Cain and Abel.
Very much so, yeah. And so what Bayami did was that he came there and he gave them his knowledge. He woke them up and gave them his knowledge. So it's said that the sun, by the way, holds all the knowledge of the universe. Everything that ever happened, every mathematical equation that ever was, the memories of that are held in the sun and come to us in the sun's rays. And we often hear of like the Egyptians, honouring the sun in that way, that they got knowledge of it. Or certainly, traditional Australia does, So in that place, once again, Mount Yango, just a little bit north of Bambara, Bayami came, woke the first of man up, and but what he did was he gave them, both them brothers, a wooded leg. And what it was, it's a piece of durra. So keep in mind his name's Durra Malan, durra. So what durra is in traditional tongue is that you could pick up a piece of dirt, that's durra. A stick off a tree, that's durra. A rock. The earth is durra. So when he woke up original man, he gave them a piece of durra, a stick. But importantly was the stick was from a branch from Tullamaree on the island, mother. And this is now their attachment to mother.
Yes.
And what happened was then he brought woman. But he brought woman from the stars, already evolved. And didn't need to be given his knowledge either. They already had it, apparently. and so now there was Durramalan and his wife, Numbadi, that's her name.
Yes.
And the Son of Light. And one day the Son of Light disappeared. And Durramalan and Numbadi were quite concerned. Where's he gone? Now, where's brother? So they followed his footprints until they eventually caught up. And eventually when they did catch up to him, they said, come home, brother. Where are you going? And he said, I've got to leave. He said, you stay with Numbadi, and he said, but I have to go. I'm going back to mother. So he'd remembered where it was that he came from, or where life came from. And but along the way, he was off to fight a mighty battle. And you'd wonder, like, who's he going to battle? These are the first 2 men to wake up, who's to argue with,
Yeah.
And but his battle was that he was, that knowledge that Bayami had put into them, on his journey now, he was going to put that into all men. So all men already existed. Unlike the Adam and Eve stories, it was just like 2 like that, They already existed. And but the thing was, they didn't have that knowledge. So his battle was to bring light over dark. And nature was more chaotic than it is today. Where the birds drop seeds, and so plants from other regions come in and pollute the place. Today we see us doing that in dumping rubbish and things, And a creek might drop a tree into it, and it would block the creek and flood the place. And now an ecology down the way is finished for some species of animal. So nature was pretty chaotic.
Also, a lot more predator, larger predators back then as well.
Well, I guess so. Yeah. So in this shining light, for all to be able to see in the dark, and also his thing was he was going to capture chaos and put it into his dilly bag that he carries with him. And with
is that the handbag that's represented in every single carving
very much so.
around and around the world, and the oldest examples are found here in Australia? Anyway,
that's exactly right. And so the bag, what he intended was to capture this chaos and take it to the south, where there he would bury it and keep his foot on it, his strong foot, which is the leg gifted by Army in the tree, his stick. And so once again, this is the story told there at Yango of the first of man. But what happens next is his footprints are actually carved now, forming a massive triangle that go all the way from Yango, heading southwest. And they can be found all the way along the way until they get to the foot of the Blue Mountains. From there, they go east to the coast. and they pop up in North Sydney. From there, they keep heading north again now, going back, and now it's heading northwest. And in all, it forms a huge triangle, very similar to the triangle first carved there, which is only a couple of metres big at Yango. They're carved into the ground over that distance of around 60 kilometres plus. But importantly, what is about those footprints is that they're not a footprint like you and I might make. They're a stick, because of course he's wooded leg.
Yeah.
And but on these toes around it, what we see is this, that when we come across a group of those footprints, there might be 3 footprints, and the toes are different numbers around the foot. Some will have, one foot might have 4, and another one 2, and another one 3. It's a written language. It's called Murray Guelda, which is a numeric, so talking in numbers,
yeah.
a numeric ideogram structure of text.
Right.
And which is a text which is done in dots, slashes, squares, circles.
Yep.
And so the story of first man is told, carved in the land in that whole journey that he walked. And so when it eventually gets back to going northwest, it finishes there at Bambara. And so very much near where the Egyptian glyphs are there is the traditional site of the Bulgari traditional glyphs. And there we see well, people think it's Bayami, but it's actually the Son of Light. And but we see the Son of Light there holding his foot down on what people think is a whale, but it's not a whale, of course. It's his bag.
It's his bag.
Yeah. And this is where he took the chaos and he buried it there,
Really?
And, yeah. So it's the longest, the oldest written story on the planet.
So just to clarify, you've found and seen some of these groups of footprints that create this story.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So part of my job as an uncle serving on a traditional panel. So I'm an uncle of the Mirrabooka. So the Mirrabooka is a panel working out from the United Sovereign Nations of Australia.
Yep.
And my position there amongst my elders is that I'm given the blessings and special permissions to enter country and reconnect those near lost, passed on stories. So that story I just told you then, the creation story has been remembered always. It was never lost. But those footprints, as we take that travel now, as first man works his way around, that was actually lost. It was near totally forgotten, and yet they survived. There's motorways and factories and housing estates, and somehow those footprints, in a great part of the area, survived to this very day.
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't it? Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, I hate to think what was lost.
Yeah, that's the question.
It must have been a great deal. And so again, this is leading us to Bambara.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
And so Bambara itself is actually a triangle. Today we just see a small section of forest of about, I think it's 300 hectares or something like that.
Yeah.
But originally the Geringi lands was that triangle. And it works out, it's 23 kilometres on either side. So working its way around 69 kilometres total on 3 sides. And that was the Bambara.
Right.
Previously, nowadays it's unfortunately South Gosford, Carryong,
it's
and
a housing estate, isn't it?
All those things, yeah,
So,
and industrial.
There's now a house estate practically backing on to Carryong now, isn't there?
There is, yeah, and there's another one coming.
Yeah.
So other things that make the Bambara important I mentioned it was a sharing place, a learning place, a healing place too.
And I think just to expand on that, and just so people because we got a lot of international listeners.
We do.
So in Indigenous culture, there was men's places, there was women's places, there was tribal places.
Yeah.
But around, it's special spots around Australia, there is what you're saying here, sharing places.
Yep.
Some of them were billabongs or waterholes. Some of them were communal hunting grounds at times. Not very, very rare, that one actually. However, there's multiple places where sharing can happen, but they're few and far between, aren't they, mate? That's not.
Yeah.
And some of them hold more importance than the other.
Very much so, yeah. Yeah, very much so. A lot of my friends who are initiated men, they can't even talk on a site of woman's business.
Absolutely.
Never mind not even go there, which is sad. Well, in a way, it's sad only because of the days we live in today. Many sites under threat can't be defended by that man.
Yes.
He can't even argue the point.
Yes.
And yet he holds the knowledge,
Yeah.
And so this is often where...
there needs to be an evolution of the thought process at times, mate. I completely understand, respect, and honour the traditional ways and how it was seen.
Yeah.
However, there's an evolution, from my perception, that needs to happen in order to be able to band together and work together.
Yeah, that's it's hard to imagine changing anything as deep as that,
And that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah.
But fortunately, this happens today. We can all, not all, but many of us can be initiated, but in a different way. Our own life experiences and knowledge, should you honour the journey, is an initiation in itself.
Absolutely.
And so someone of that value, can talk for that man on that woman's side to that woman, the go-between.
Yeah.
That never happened before, but now we can have that. And that's actually happening now.
Is
many
it the,
places I deal with. That's
the spirit of Wirrajin, is that as well, working together?
Well, I guess so. Yes, yeah, I guess so. So again about the Bambara, why it's so important is at the end of the day, that was the initiation place for many tribes, not just for the Gurungi. So tribes out west of places like Cairns and Townsville will tell you this same story I'm going to tell you now. Mm-hmm. So what would happen when it was time for a young man to become or a boy to become a man, and that could be between the ages of 14 to 18, depending on where they were coming from, And what would happen would be that that young man would go on a journey with an older man like myself, so still fit enough to hunt and defend if he had to, But all the while he'd be teaching that boy. And so they'd be walking. That's a very long way from Cairns to the Central Coast, in New South Wales. Yeah. But along the journey, there'd be many places to go to, including the stone circles at Mullumbimby.
Yes.
Places like this.
Yeah.
And where there'd be a lot of learning that the boy would be given along his journey. So along the way, that the older man's teaching him to be able to hunt, to navigate, knowledge, cultural knowledge, spiritual knowledge, all these things, So the older man was called a nana, and the boy was seen as he's not actually born yet. He won't be born until that moment he becomes a man. So in the meantime, he's seen as a fetus, and he exists in the womb of the old man, of the nana.
Okay.
And these are deep cultural things, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Makes your eyebrows go up.
No. It's you're giving me more detail to a story that I was already familiar with.
Right.
My understanding is that they would have a children's name. Is that correct? And then they would transition. And you're talking about the transition at the moment. During that transition,
at the end of the journey, yes.
they would have their man, their name of the man that they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so once again, along that journey, that the boy's growing all that time inside the womb of the elder, and so eventually they arrive at Bambara. So what we see today, still existing at Bambara. So when I say Bambara, I'm not talking about the little forest. I'm talking about Bateman's Bay, around that area, because it was bigger before.
Yes.
It's only today we see that little forest. So, but all around the Bambara, the bay, are the initiation sites for a number of tribes, not just for the Gurungi. And so what would happen would be where they would arrive at their initiation site for that particular mob that's travelled that long way.
Would they have separate sites within the Bambara?
Separate, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, separate. All looking out towards the sea.
Yeah, all facing...
Towards the island,
yeah.
Mully, And so what would happen there would be, now the boy's got all his knowledge, on initiation day was the last week of December.
Okay.
Summer solstice coming up,
Yep.
So what would happen on that day would be the boy would get his last informations, and then as the sun came over the horizon on that day, when the sun appears to stop in the sky for a few moments, and that's that moment where it's the closest point on Earth to sun, where the sun's rays hit land, what would happen there would be just before the daylight robbed the night view of the sky, the last 3 stars coming over the horizon, so I'm taking you back now 5,000 years, when things started to change, as Earth's natural tilt, has changed our view in the sky. But always had been for a long time, was coming over the horizon was the last 3 stars visible before we lost the night view. They were the Orion. So they called them the 3 wise men.
Right.
So what was about to happen was this man's about to become a boy. That boy is about to become a man.
Yep.
He's going to be born now, because he's not seen as born before. And
Born the 3 wise men looking over him, and born from the light that comes over the horizon.
But important thing about a traditional man, when he's initiated, he's a king. I mean, a king. He's a king of his own head. There is nobody higher than he regarding his own sovereignty, his own business, And so he is a king, And so a king is about to be born. But importantly is his mother is Marie, the tree. So the tree on Mulla, so Mulla is the island, beautiful mother, but the tree of life on Lion Island is called Tula Marie, and that Tula Marie. So Marie is the great spirit of sustenance, if we like, the great spirit of this land. So she is the soil, the water moving under the soil, under our feet, the wind that brings the seasons, so all those things that are sustenance needed for life to exist. So you can create life, but you've got to have the sustenance for it to be consistent, So Mother does that, So the great spirit of the land throughout many of the different language speakers around Australia is Murray, Muree, Murray.
Yes.
But the important thing is she's a virgin. Because you can't have sex with the soil.
So, sorry, would you just say Mary?
Well, let's see.
Yeah.
And so here we are, on around the 23rd of December, that week of summer solace, the sun stops in the sky on that day. And here's a boy now about to be born a king, witnessed by the 3 wise men that follow the great star in the east, which is the sun coming over the horizon. And his mother is Marie, a virgin. So you can see where that's coming,
Yes.
or going,
Yes.
So that story is so old, that it predates the current tilt of Earth, in the way that now when the Orion come over the horizon, it's probably about now. And when we would see it in the dark, it's already well above our head,
Yeah, at the moment, in a couple of hours, it's going to be there.
Already well advanced, compared to at dawn back then, And so you can see how now Bambara is so important, where it gives birth to Earth each day in the sun's energy coming through. And it was that very place where man was first awakened and captured the chaos, and man now started to control nature. And of course, our traditional custodians were experts at controlling nature.
Absolutely.
And they perfected it.
You never hear of a major fire in the Northern Territory, Colin.
No, you don't, do you?
No, you don't. No. Why is that, mate? Why is that? Because they still got control of the land up there.
I'd like to think so, I'd like to think so,
yeah. Or many years up there, you always knew different times, like there'd just be a fire. There'd be a fire a couple of times a year in different spots.
Yes.
And that is them renewing the land and making sure the brush is clear and making sure the animals get fed and all these things. This all feeds into this cycle and understanding the land.
That's right, yeah. Unfortunately, on the East Coast, all those things are lost.
Yes. Yeah, we put it...
We have that chaos again now.
I drove... I told you before, I'd spent a lot of time on the road. I was driving to the north side all the way over to past Launton to work from here. And I literally watched them put a fence around a national park to keep us out.
Wow.
Like, there would have been millions of dollars in this chain link fence, proper concrete posts, 10 foot high. Conserving the environment, Colin, is what they called it.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
Well, as long as it keeps the industry out. Want to be a big fence, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the fence was an industry in itself, mate. That's the problem. You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, we can't go into the land and honour it and actually use it. No.
Yeah.
It's hard though, because obviously in these days, as you say, embracing the chaos now, that we don't look after it like we should.
No, that's right. Yeah, and the Bambara probably caught more damage than most places. In cutting the serpent's head off. And that's how colonization works. Cut the serpent's head off. So once again, getting back to the Bambara, so you can see, giving birth to Earth each day. She's certainly the mother for Earth. And then of course, the creation stories of evolved from there. And then once again, right through the millenniums, this was the important place for initiation. And but the Bambara too is a birthing place, and a healing place. And so let's jump now a little bit into the future, closer to our time, And so what's happened there, closer to our time, was that in India, and which is greatly Indonesia as well, Jakarta, all those places, not just India itself, but the old India, around 5,000 years ago, back then, they were still young enough within their evolution to remember their beginnings place. And they, around 5,000 years ago now, they started to write for the first time. And they started to record these things. And so in their earliest texts, they talk about the beginnings place and where it was. And talking about it in the way that it's at that place where the first light hits Earth as it comes through each day. Yeah. And in the south, And so the
many cultures speak of this, and this is
they do. Yeah,
this is and this is one of the things we've already spoken about in here, Colin, and you're just providing us with very interesting detail, such a brilliantly told as well. Is that it was an initiation place for the original people here, but it was also an initiation place for many others.
It was,
well.
Yeah, certainly was. Yeah, that's right. That's what's coming to light, and no more greatly than those of India. So when I say those of India, greatly I talk of the Tamil Indian. The Tamil recorded their informations very well, but it's not only them. It's the Tamil 5,000 years ago were seen in the south of India. They were also about mid-west of India, and they also show indicators of appearing alongside Indus Valley. And Indus Valley's a real mystery. It seems like they just disappeared.
Yeah. Indus Valley's on the pictures from there are unbelievable. It looks like they just up and left basically.
Yeah, it seems that way. Yeah, I'm sure they didn't. I'm sure many stayed, but there was no doubt about it. There was certainly an exodus took place. And so what it was that in the year 3142 BC, on a Tuesday afternoon at 1:30. No, I'm joking you about that.
Yeah.
It was midnight.
That's right. No, it was really a Wednesday.
Yeah. What happened for those was that the Indians were great travellers, especially the Tamil. They were the first seafarers, and they travelled the known world. And today people look at them and go, well, how do they do that? They didn't have a keel, like how do you cross a sea current without a keel, Well, the thing was, and they told it well, that they followed the migrating turtles in the currents. And this was their way of getting around, So it looks like they'd been getting around for as long as the waters started to put the lands further and further apart,
Right.
And so it wasn't just one day they set out to sea. Their experience and their technology evolved over those thousands of years as the waters came about.
We must mention, if we're talking about India, we can't not, and we're talking about technology, we can't not talk about the temples made from single pieces of stone.
They're incredible.
We can't not talk. Have you seen and see, for me, they're unbelievable.
Many people haven't seen them,
I know. It's an unknown thing.
The water wells in the ground that are as big as shopping centres.
It's unbelievable. And have you seen the chains made from stone? How can you even
do that?
And the cogs and the gears? It looks like mechanical objects there.
By the
you
way,
know?
Indian masons still carve that way, you know.
Do
They
yeah,
still
right.
create like that by hand and everything,
Mm.
you know, so they haven't got like a lot of tech around them.
Mm.
The bloke sitting there with chisels and his carvings, tools and so
Mm.
on. Yeah, they still do that today.
Mm. But it's just
Incredible.
amazing.
Amazing, yeah. The world missed out there. We were never told that.
Mm.
In my British education, they never mentioned anything about the greatness of old India, you know.
Mm.
Never, you know. But anyway, so it seems that the Indians, they when they first started to write, they were still in that time frame that they could remember their earliest origins and made note of it. But what happened for them was in the year 3142 BC, so 5,163 years ago,
On a Tuesday.
on a midnight.
Yeah.
And what happened was that the natural Earth shift, they noticed that something in the sky changed. And what it was in those years, there was a North Polar Star and a South Polar Star.
Mm-hmm.
The South Polar Star they called Apis,
Mm-hmm.
and the North Polar Star was, I think, Tutmore, something like that. It said Thupmore. And but they noticed that they'd moved off their access point,
Yes.
Earth's axis.
Because, yeah, Sirius is the North Star now, isn't it? But it wasn't always.
It's not serious, no.
Oh, no. I'm trying to remember what the North Star is.
Yeah, I'm going to let you guess.
Oh, thanks, mate. It's not serious? No, it's not serious.
It's not serious.
No.
No.
No, it's gone. It's gone. I'm not even going to try and guess.
Okay, well, we're still back 5,000 years ago anyway.
Yeah.
And so then it was two different stars. But important was that they used that for navigation.
Mm.
You know? And the Tamil especially, you know, in the ocean sea voyages, you know, as well as following the turtle, they were using the stars for navigation. And so to them it was important that now they wouldn't be able to use them. As they moved, now the maps aren't going to work. So they were going to be cut off from Mother, Tulamari, and or the island. So they called the island Kumari, and that was their name. Ku, it means south, and Mari is again Mari, you know, the great goddess, they call her.
Yeah.
So it's basically the goddess in the south. They were going to be cut off.
Hang on a second. I can't let that slip. So you're saying in India, Mari is also a goddess.
Yes. Yes.
And then we have Mary, and we have Mari as in indigenous.
Yes.
The echoes.
Yep.
Echoes.
It was same all the way around the world. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The modern version that you and I were more familiar with some years ago, Mary and Jesus.
Yes.
That's the most modern one.
Yes.
That's basically recently compared to these others, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so importantly for the Indians, you know, they seen it that they were going to be cut off from Mother, which means over time they were going to be cut off from original knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
The teaching was going to be stopped. So that's a big thing to them. So they seen that as an incoming cycle of chaos called the Kali Yuga. And so now the Kali Yuga would begin, and this is when it began on the 3142 BC, midnight.
Midnight on Tuesday.
Yeah. So they weren't going to allow that to happen easily. You know, they were brilliant people, and so they wanted a solution. So they made one, and their solution was that they came back to Bambara again, and from there they took the chief of the day. So the chief of the day, he comes to us through Gurungi passed down stories now. So his name was a man called Chief Manay. He also had a name he was given on his initiation from there at Lion Island. That name I can't share with you.
Okay.
Because that name, when it was written, that was what you were talking about before, when you get your initiation name. And it was written on a stone which comes from the island. But you can't show that to anybody.
No,
you know?
it's your name, yeah. Your true name.
Yeah, and that's between you and the Creator. You know, no one knows that. But I know Manay's name, but obviously, of course, I can't say that. So we'll go with Manay, and that's what they call him in Gurungi law, you know. And so what happened was the Indians came here, and they took Manay. So Manay wasn't just a chief; he was a Magi chief. Not all chiefs are Magis and vice versa. Yeah. And so what he was famous for here in Australia through Gurungi law was there at Bambara, he brought heaven down to earth. And what it was he created there using his Magi another dimension. A dimension there where our ancestors can live amongst us, rubbing shoulders with us. And so what he did was he carved into the ground all around Bambara the image of the sky above. So when we're visiting near the glyphs and so on, we often see these round circles, and they're carved everywhere all about.
Yeah.
And it's a night view. So he brought heaven down to earth.
Yeah, it's a star map. Yeah, I've seen that. Yes.
Yeah, he brought heaven down to earth to create a place for the ancestors to live here. So now Bambara, it's gone from being the place where Earth is reborn every day, and a place where people are initiated, and all these things. That now it's heaven as well, heaven on earth.
Heaven on earth.
Yeah, so you see how big it is, Bambara. Before I arrived, you knew nothing of Bambara, did you?
I knew about the glyphs. I knew about the star map.
That's
I knew
all people
about,
know. Yeah,
I knew about the grandmother tree there. I knew.
Yeah,
I knew. As I say, you're filling gaps
Yeah.
in my knowledge.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very. Thank you very much for sharing this story, man.
Oh, great pleasure. That tree, by the way, that's a seed from the one on the island.
Right.
Yeah, it's one of
Okay.
hers. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I have one of those seeds.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And,
Yeah, right.
And I'll plant that one day,
Yeah.
And
so on it goes.
yeah, it does, yeah. So where was I at with it?
We were talking about Mulan bringing the
Indians.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right, yeah. So they came here to Chief Monet, and what it was they were going to go out into the world and teach man out there the knowledge to survive the timeline of chaos, the Kali Yuga.
which we're approaching the end of, hopefully, but we've been there for a while.
We're there. We're there, yeah. And the Kali Yuga actually lasts a couple 100,000 years, but there's a bit of a twist to the story, you know?
Okay.
And a clause in the contract, you might say, And anyway, so they took Monet out with them, and so Monet's carrying original knowledge,
Yep.
And for the Indian, of course, they're carrying building knowledge, those buildings we were talking about, But by the way, Monet just didn't have like tribal knowledge, There is no better teachers of how to handle the country than culture. We all know that.
Absolutely.
And
so sort of my interpretation of it is, when you talk about, we talk about indigenous DNA being found in South America. We talk about
yes, we do.
it spreading across the globe.
Yes.
However, my understanding, is that they came here to learn how to handle the land, and that's why, because we had a lengthy discussion about spirituality in here, and basically the fact that spirituality is the same across the globe, and I think the reason it's the same is because it came from one knowledge. They obviously took it back to their respective lands and used the knowledge and adapted it for their environment.
Well, this is where it's coming from.
Exactly, and this
From
is
from that day, 3142 BC.
yeah.
And so the Tamil took Monet and whoever else went with them. So I'm suspecting the Indus Valley peoples, they too are in this deal,
Okay.
And so in Indian law, we see them as the avatars now, the avatars of Vishnu. So you see them climbing into a boat to sail through the chaos and the churning milky waters, they call them. And they were expecting a big flood in all this chaos. This is where the flood comes from, because we know the great religious flood of the Bible never happened. There's no scientific evidence that in that time frame there ever was an actual flood.
You would, but you see, my perception of that is, wouldn't you, the cataclysm that happened 12,800 years ago when the sea level rose 400 feet practically overnight,
Well,
wouldn't that be the flood that we speak of?
no, they're talking from a time 5,000 years ago. And in that time there's never been a flood. That never happened.
But is that not not the constant flood myth an echo of a memory from that time?
No, they're pretty precise about it, talking about that event at that time. So the way it's written in oldest India's text is they say, and they're talking of Kumari, or Lion Island, if you like, Tulamari. And what it is that they said these words: the waters were drawn around her. That's all they said. They didn't say she sunk. It's only in our modern day, for some reason, that everybody put that as, it sunk. Atlantis sunk, and everything sunk. But it wasn't that at all. It directly says the waters were drawn around, and that is, as we say, the waters rising up some. And other than that, of course, moving off the polar stars, and they couldn't navigate there anymore. Now, if you use those old maps to navigate to Line Island, you'd end up somewhere between New Zealand and Victoria.
Yeah, right.
In the middle of the sea,
Yeah.
as if the place sunk,
Yeah.
you know. And that's what they were getting at, you know.
Mm.
So it was no flood. They talked of chaos, but they never actually said that there was a worldwide flood. It never happened. Only exists in modern English, and it's gone on from there into popular belief.
Mm.
So once again, they took Monet out, and so today to find evidences of Monet and the Tamil in the land.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, so the sea turtle migration routes have never changed. They're still there today.
Mm.
And so following those places, it takes us to places like Crete. So we find Monet there too, and there he's called Minos. And then we find him in northern India up the top, and there he's called Manu.
Mm.
We find him in South America, and there he's called Masor. And so in all these places, his name only just changed a little bit. But this is what we see. Now's the start of the pyramid age. We start to see pyramids popping up and buildings all over the place, And so once again, this was their solution to the timeline of the Kali Yuga, to educate man and give him knowledge to survive. But that wasn't the only thing they wanted to do. What they were going to do was, now because man was going to be cut off from original knowledge and home, mother, in the beginnings place, so they were going to build a place in the north and a copy of it. And so as well as taking out this teaching, what they did next was they arrived into Egypt. And there now Egyptian history takes off. And we'll let the Egyptians themselves tell that. And the way they tell it is that the one called Osiris Menet, it's him again, our chief Menet, he turns up upon their shores. And the Egyptians, because they were an old race, there's evidence there, 40, 50,000 years of consistent society, And so like Australia, nobody was discovering it. And but Monet turns up on their shores, and they rush out to fend him off with their spears and shields. Monet rises his arm up in the air and swings a strange stick that makes an ungodly sound. It's his Woomera.
The Woomera.
His Bullroarer, sorry.
Yeah.
His Bullroarer.
Yeah.
And not his Woomera, that's a weapon.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But his Bullroarer, and scares them all away. And,
which, for those that haven't heard that sound, I've had the privilege of it is an unearthly sound.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. I've certainly heard a lot of it. And he tells them, he says, look, I'm not here to fight you. He said, I'm here to teach, to make you and your country the greatest nation, the most powerful nation on all earth. And they did. And it wasn't just that they were teaching there. That's the place where they wanted to copy this house of God, the Creator's house. And so what's become evident was that in Egypt, that's exactly what they did. That huge triangle that the Son of Light first walked, that's carved into the land there around Bambara, there they did the same thing there. They call it Giza. And so Giza, when I say that word, you imagine 3 pyramids standing there and the Sphinx. Look from above now, look down like a Google Earth. Yeah. And it's actually set on a large triangle.
Yes.
And on one side, each southeast corner of the pyramids, each one touches that triangle line. On the other side, it runs through a number of things there. So in Bambara in Australia, we've got this. It's taking to the glyphs now at Bambara. And so just up from the glyphs is a tomb. So the glyphs aren't the only thing to be seen at Bambara, by the way. You've got between the walls the glyphs, and just 200 yards up is a tomb, and it's got carvings too. So that tomb we know to be the house of Henetson. That's the name of the woman that's buried there. So if we impose that triangle now onto the ground, where these things lay on that triangle goes like this. At the peak of it is the house of Henetson, where the tomb is in Bambara. As you work your way down the line, it goes directly between the walls. So those walls are actually on a northwest line. And so this northwest line that's important here starts at the house of Henetson, runs right between the furrow, in a dead line, right between it. keeps heading then southeast. This is a northwest line, so looking backwards, that's southeast. You know? And so there it crosses over the northwest side of Lion Island, touches it, and then heads off some distance down the road and finishes at 23 kilometres further down where it started, forming that big triangle. So in Egypt, they did the same thing. So what they did was, where in their triangle, right at its peak, they built there the Temple of Isis. And by the way, Bambara, the Pharaoh, that's the Temple of Isis, leg of the bull. That's its real name. So in Egypt, they did the same thing. They built the Temple of Isis there. Just in front of it is the small pyramid they call the House of Henetzen. And then as you follow their northwest line down, it goes directly over the hindquarters of the Sphinx. And then again on into the distance to something else over there. I keep saying something else over there because there's something I'm not telling you.
Okay. I picked that up.
Yeah, off air I'll certainly tell you. And but there's something else again, you know. Anyway, so what they did was they copied Bambara, exactly, and they tell of it, you know. And what they did was they copied it by shrinking it by 7. So to them it was an important measure called measure, M-E-H, measure. And the principle of measure was that if you took a number and there was 1,000 involved in it, that's the key, opens the door, there's 1,000 involved in that number. Now divide the number by 7 and then create something out of that. And it's magic, you know, magic. And so what they did, once again, was the huge triangle that Bambara is on, they shrunk it by 7. That is the town plan of Giza that it's built on. But then the Sphinx, they copied from Lion Island, exactly. So the Sphinx is 74.47. I measured it, by the way, while I was there. 74.47 meters. But when you times that by 7, that works out to 523 meters, which is Lion Island. It's 523 meters exactly. Across its back, it's I hope I get this right, just saying this off memory, but 190 meters across its width, and divided by 7. So I could be wrong here. I think it's 120 actually. But divided by 7, it works out at 17.6 meters, exactly the width of the Sphinx. The Sphinx is 22 meters high, and so it is 1/7 of Lion Island of its height, which is 159 meters exactly high. So by shrinking its height, its width, and its length, they recreated it there in Giza, and again in this measure, and so the head on it, you know, that's another story. The head came after. So that first business of creating the image of the home of Mother in Egypt was the solution to building a house of God there in the north, you know. And of course, you know, copying it from the most sacred place on the planet, you know, from the beginnings place here in Australia. And so...
what about the technology, though, mate? I mean, we couldn't recreate some of that stuff today that's in Egypt.
Why not? Why do you doubt that?
Well, being a student or a professional of logistics... We probably could recreate the Great Pyramid, but the question would be why, and how. Yeah, we don't have the motivation they had, and their motivation was to make a home for Mother. And so how it all began, what they started with was it was all underground before it ever got over the ground. Absolutely.
So they see, when I say they, you know, talking of the ancients and talking of our brothers from culture today.
But the precision of some of that stuff in Egypt. Would be hard to create with today's technology.
Stone block, what's hard about that?
It's not about the stone block. It's about the precision inside, like the boxes at Saqqara. You know,
I've seen them. Yeah, I've been there.
It's the statues that are mirrored one to the other. You know, it's almost
Yeah.
The precision behind that
Yeah.
would need our most modern computers today to replicate.
We can do it today, yeah. And yeah, it's hard to know how could they do it, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But if we can do it today, well, they're men too. They've got 2 heads, 2 arms. I wish they did have 2 heads. Two arms and 2 legs and a head. You know, they got exactly everything we've got. And if you see, you know, like in India today, you know, that the masons, the way they work with their hands, it'll take all those doubts away for you. You know. But oh goodness me.
You're right, mate.
Yeah. So again, yeah. So important about Giza was this. Was that once again they were making a home there for the creators, you know. So it's easy for the sun in the way that the sun travels through the sky, you know, so he can move about. But mother, both in cultural Australia, India and Egypt, they all see mother the same way. She travels in the waters, moving in the soils under our feet. So what they did there was they're trying to get mother there. And so the natural aquifers that run under the ground, what they did, that's mother moving along in those waters. So they blocked them up in places and then made shafts which came up to the surface. So now the water came up onto the surface. Mother was arrived. So once again, you know, there's Ra, the sun, you know, coming in the sky, but now here's mother arriving up from under the soil, moving under our feet. So whilst in Egypt, part of my observations there were to find out where did that water come from, you know. And so we were able to get down inside the aquifers and see how they were, or down the shafts that appear in Giza, and see how they were blocked up and re-diverted. And but then we were able to follow the wear of the water on the ground throughout the Giza complex. And we see... it was John West, wasn't it? You know, had the theory of you know, rain 13,000 years ago and all that sort of thing. You know, well, those things didn't exist 13,000 years ago. We know that through a lot of things, especially through the relative text that tells about it. You know, when they built it. So, absent of the fact that they didn't exist 13,000 years ago, it was important to find the evidence on the ground. Where did the water come from? So, working away from the back wall of the Sphinx enclosure. Back up the Giza plateau, it was obvious, very obvious, of fast-moving water had worn away the sides of the Khafre Causeway. So that's a large walkway that comes out of the Khafre Pyramid, which is in the middle of the three, goes right beside the Sphinx. So that's how the water got there. It didn't come from the sky at all. It came from the earth. It was creating a home for mother right there. And... you know, answering a lot of mysteries about what it was for. You know, what was their motivation to build Giza in the first place? This copying of Bambara, the house of God. You know, and so they didn't just copy the house. They they made it so, you know, that mother could arrive up onto the surface there. Here at Bambara, we see her coming out of the rivers, out of the Hawkesbury River and the other rivers around that area. Yeah, coming from the mountains, and you know, the mountains are the you know, the mountain of Hathor, you know, is considered to be like the mistress of the mountains, you know, and so on. And so, you know, here, you know, where the water travels coming through the rivers, there, of course, in the desert it doesn't. You know?
Well, let's fast forward, mate. Let's fast forward.
Yeah.
Because am I to understand, speaking to you before we turn the mics on, 7 years ago you didn't have the knowledge that you just shared with us now.
Yeah. So
what happened to send you down the rabbit hole?
Yes, well, what a story that is, you know. Basically, I put my hand up. I did, you know, and it went like this, you know, that my family, my kids, you know, your grown kids are your greatest critics, and they judge you terribly, you know. And so they seen it that I was getting old.
Right.
And so here I am, 55, by the way, at that time, you know. And so they're seeing it like I'm destined to get Alzheimer's, you know. And so my kids are all quite brilliant, and they can talk different languages. And I've got, you know, quite an extensive general knowledge. And but they wanted me to be able to now talk a different language. And that would help me in my old age and stave off this. To them, what was obvious, I was obviously getting Alzheimer's or something.
Right.
And anyway, so they banded together and they bought me a computer. And so using this computer now, I was going to learn a language. So to appease the kids, and plus it seemed like an interesting sort of thing to do. I started to look at languages, and so I looked at Japanese and French, and I had a head start on French and German. We were taught in school, so it was something I was familiar with, But at the end of the day, it was all Japanese to me, and I didn't really have the interest either, And but what happened was I came across just the sort of thing you can Google and you see it on Wiki, and it was an alphabet of hieroglyphs.
Yeah.
And there was about 22 hieroglyphs on it, And it would be things like a foot is the letter B, a wedge-tailed eagle, which is an Australian, by the way. It's unique to Australia, that species. But the wedge-tailed eagle in Egyptian was the letter A, and so on. And but alongside this alphabet, was their ideogram means. So when we say that an eagle is an A and a foot is a B and so on, that's their alphabetical. So hieroglyphs have more than one mean to them.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So their ideogram value is more of a story behind the symbol. So the foot becomes this place. And when we see that foot drawn, it's drawn quite heavily. And if it's carved deep. So it's saying this place, meaning it like that. And the wedge-tailed eagle becomes the Great Spirit. So instead of being a letter, it's a story. So like a telegram. So the way a telegram is shortened, a long story into it, an ideogram, telegram, same thing, an idea in a gram. So what I was interested in was these ideograms. I thought, how easy is this? Like my mum, when she taught me to read, showed me a bucket and said bucket. Pete showed me an apple and said apple. So that's more my cup of tea,
Yeah.
And I could see that learning alphabetical hieroglyph text is a specialist learning. Like you really do need to go to university to learn that stuff. And or if not university, then you need to be in front of a great master for a very, very long time. And but the ideogram didn't seem so hard. And anyway, within days, I'd internalized it enough that now I could look at things and attempt to read, but nothing made sense. But still, the interest had got me. And so what happened now was a diversion. Because now I'm on the internet, and this was the first time I'm using Facebook seriously.
Yep.
I sucked at it. It was a hard learning curve. And that first machine they bought me, by the way, wasn't an iPad. It was an actual laptop. But meaning well, they didn't put a big enough budget into it. So like any command took 5 minutes for it to come forth.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a good place for a learning curve to exist into. Because I'm just trying to learn, and so I'm pressing buttons galore and getting nowhere. So and Facebook, trying to learn that for the first time on such a device. But in amongst all that, I seen a Facebook post. And it's quite a famous one in a way that a lot of people know about this. And what it was a lady called Susan Rankin, and she's an elder from Victoria. And so here's Susan Rankin talking, and she's effing and swearing, by the way. She's really cranky and pissed off, Yeah. She's saying, what's wrong with this world? Why won't one of you men just get up and do something? Are you all lost to the grog and the money? Just do something. One of you, what's going on? She was pleading, So Susan Rankin and her 6 lady friends, these aunties, 7 of them, they were about to set off on a journey to walk from Victoria to Canberra to hand in their modern-day birth certificates, driver's licences and so on. And they were going to give those in Canberra they handed to them, a good lecture on why they were doing that they were claiming their sovereignty back. So this was them about to start their journey, and here she is making this call out, And now, so at this time, I had no Indigenous friends. On the Tweed, there aren't that many. So since high school, I'd lost contact with those friends that I had. And so we just didn't have any Indigenous friends at all. And I had very little, I had no Indigenous knowledge whatsoever, But still, I can't say no to a lady, And so I stood up. And now this Susan Rankin, she never got to see this because she can't see me on the other side of a Facebook post,
Yeah.
But I deliberately stood up.
I physically stood up.
I physically stood up and I put one foot forward and I said, lady, I'll have a go. I'll do something. And my thoughts were I was going to go and hug a tree, or join some sort of petition, anything.
Yeah.
And but the thing was that wasn't ever to be, But but the other thing was I stood up. I made a conscious decision I would do something. Well, a very strange thing happened. I'm in that early study of hieroglyphs, and what happened was this one morning I woke up. And what it is at home, we do exactly the same thing every day. Tomorrow morning will be the same, My wife comes to my side, she picks up my hand, and as she does, I'm already starting to awake. And I stand, we kiss, and I make a joke. And how I do that at 4:45 in the morning, God knows, but somehow, I manage to crack off funny,
Yeah.
And we have a little giggle, and then we start our day. But on this day, I sensed my wife coming, and she's picked up my hand, and as she picked up my hand, I've stood up, and as I went to kiss her, it wasn't my wife, it was a black man standing there, and he was as black, he was so black he was almost purple. In fact, he was purple a bit, I'd say his forehead and cheeks, he had a bit of purple about him, He was so black. He was older than me, at 55 I was then, and he had a thick mop of black curly hair, or wavy hair, not curly but wavy, but thick, I'll never forget it. Really black pupils, white eyes, but big black pupils. And like me, he was very veiny, when I go to give blood, they love me, and they see me, I'm full of veins. And he was like that too, And he was a bit thinner than me, I'm only 72 kilos, 5'9", so I'm pretty skinny, sort of, but I'd like to feel muscly, but he was like that. He looked like he could outrun an emu, for his light build,
Yeah.
Anyway, and there's this man standing right in front of me, and he's pissed off. And so this is a big shock. I went to kiss my wife, and all of a sudden there's a black man in my house.
Right.
and like I said, I'm not used to that then.
No.
Nowadays, like my family, or my brothers and sisters from country. But 7 years ago, I wasn't used to that. And so I was stunned, but at the same time, I don't scare easily,
Yeah.
But I'm looking at him, and he's saying, take it. So he's talking English to me. And he's pointing to the side. And I'm saying, take what? And in my hand, I've got an iPad, this one. And so when I open this iPad up, we can see the lid falls down. That's exactly the scene. I'm holding one of these. And I'd never seen an iPad in my life at that stage. So I didn't even know what it was. And it's obvious he's indicating to it, take it. And I said, look, I don't know what you mean. And the more I said that, the more cranky he got. But what I'm doing, I'm thinking now, hang on a minute. I can hear this guy, I can see this guy. There's two sensors going off, I was also very familiar with the smell of the bush. I'm not at home, I'm out somewhere.
Yeah, right.
And we're in a cave. That's the scene I'm seeing. And so now I can smell as well. So I grabbed my clothes with my hand and started to feel to see if I can feel. So I'm testing all my senses. And it wasn't hard to realise, I don't know what's going on, but this is real.
Yeah.
Whatever this is, it's real, and there was no way to avoid it. And anyway, so I looked to what it is he's pointing at, and within this cave, and there's a wall directly to my side. And as I looked, I just seen chicken scratchings. It didn't really make any sense at all. And again, he's saying, take it. There was an emergency in his voice. And looking at the iPod, I said, I don't know how. And I looked at the wall one more time, and as I did, I looked back, he's gone, and my calf's standing there laughing her head off. And so she's thinking this is the funny of the day.
This is your joke. This is your...
Yeah. And I'm like, Kath, where'd he go? And I'm looking under the bed and in the wardrobe and in the bathroom. And in the end, she's got the jack of that. Yeah, she said, "Oh, knock it off. Enough's enough." I said, "No, Kath, where's the man? He was right here, And so goodness knows what she thought of me, But it left a very big impression on my mind, But I didn't know what was going on yet. The thing was, I'd put my hand up and they'd come and get me, And anyway, so the learning went on, of still learning the hieroglyphs and so on and what I was doing. So what I'd done was we'll put Dee Dee away. His name was Dee Dee, by the way. So we'll just put Dee Dee away for a minute. So with the hieroglyphs, I didn't realise I'd made a mistake in the way that I'd got fastened onto those ideograms. And now I'm searching for those, So to find just one more and its meaning, I had to read entire encyclopedias. So I'm haunting Eleanor Library and Burleigh Library down there on the Gold Coast because the internet was no good to me. I was really struggling in that learning curve and that stupid computer, that was just too slow,
Yeah.
I better have water, eh?
Yeah, have a drink.
And
mate.
but the thing was, this hard search, my general knowledge was growing the whole time.
Yeah, because you're obviously synthesizing data, you're taking in articles, you're learning different bits and pieces.
Yeah, it was so much. And but still, I was up for it. I could actually feel that I had room in my head for that. And so here I am, still learning more and more and more and more. And then one day I was at the doctor's, and I wasn't there by choice. My calf had nagged me. So as much as the kids were convinced I was going to get Alzheimer's one day, she's convinced I'm going to get bowel cancer or something.
Right.
And at 55, I hadn't been to the doctor for years, And she'd nagged and nagged and nagged that I had to go to the doctor and get a checkup. You're supposed to when you're 55.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to when you're 40.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah.
And anyway, so she booked the appointment, and I went. And here I am now sitting in a doctor's surgery, and everybody's much older than me, and it was God's waiting room, it really was. And so I'm trying not to make eye contact with any of these people. And on the coffee table was magazines open, so I'm pretending to read from a distance, like Superman. I can see across the room, but pretending to read just anything, so I didn't have to make eye contact. But then I noticed on one page that was open, there was these texts or some glyphs. It was actually Bambara. This is my first time I've ever seen it.
Right.
And but it was only one picture of one sentence. And it turned out it was that Stephen Strong fellow. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah, I've had him on the podcast.
Right, yeah. And he was talking about it as being to do with ancient aliens,
Yeah.
And there was a spaceship,
Yeah.
And but the thing was that I looked at it, and as I looked at it, I could read it. And this is really the first time now I've been able to read something because I've been trying to apply what I've been learning, but it wasn't making any sense. And this was just 4 or 5 individual symbols, and I looked at it and went, oh goodness me, yeah. And when I picked it up, I had a Google Earth reference alongside it of where it was on the planet. Well, astronomy is a hobby of mine. I've had that hobby for decades.
Yeah, right.
And so when a Google Earth measure comes up, it's pretty obvious to me somewhere where that is. But I recognised it instantly as the east coast of Australia. And I thought, what? That's doable. If it would have been Peru or something, But I thought that's actually doable. And but I didn't take in the story, of what the other fellow had said. Thank goodness. And but anyway, I wanted to get to that place, And so still the learning continued as I made preparations that I'm going to go to this place. I had to convince my wife that I could go to this place. And I hadn't left home in all these near 40 years. By that it was 35 years being married then. I'd never left home once, And I'm going to convince her, that I'm going to head off down to Sydney on my own on what seemed like a ridiculous thing to do.
A fool's errand.
But nonetheless, I did it, and this day I set off. And so that whole set of walls, I still hadn't seen that stuff yet. It was just this, and what I'm hoping to do is to find it. And so I got into the area, and I arrived there. It was a weekend, so I worked all day. And as I knocked off, I got in the car, just drove, and I arrived there at midnight on Halloween. It was midnight Halloween. And as all I've got is a Google reference, Earth reference, and I got nothing else, no directions, which way to go, no nothing. And so I parked the car, and my idea was I was going to do a circle, and getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller circle until I got to that spot, But I didn't know what I was up against. That is rough terrain, And to never have seen it before, not have any idea where you are, and it's in the middle of the night, I had my work cut out for me. But I've always been an adventurer, and this wasn't my first time, And so anyway, setting off into the forest with a rucksack, rope, torches on my hat, on both wrists and on my belt, and I'm about to leap in there. But you wouldn't believe it, out of the blue, a lady turns up, and we gets talking, And anyway, I showed her the picture I had, the only one picture, And because she couldn't believe I'm about to do this, by the way, and set off into the forest,
Yeah.
on Halloween, in the middle of the night. And anyway, and I showed her the picture, and she went, "Oh my God!" She said, "My father found that years ago when I was a little girl, and he brought me back all through our life, and we could never ever find it again." She said, "Would you mind? Can I come with you?" I said, "What? Come with me in there, And I shined the torch. The first thing it landed on was this massive spider, and that didn't scare her, She said, "I'm not frightened." I said, "Oh, but and I said, "You got no shoes on?" And she looked at me and said, "I'm homeless." Well, what do you say about that? Melt my heart, So I gave her my shoes. And I only just got them that day. Gave her my shoes. And put the first aid kit in a little bag for her and the water, And off we go now together. So suddenly I've got a friend, And anyway, we searched. Well, not searched. We were once again in that circle. But through the night, I'd lost the compass. And middle of dead bush, no compass, didn't know which way was left, right, backwards or forwards. But of course I had my crystal. So the crystal that I use when I'm navigating at sea. And there's nothing magic about it, it's just in that way that a crystal slows down light. So looking through the crystal, I could pick on a light source somewhere in the distance. So what I Google Earthed was where the motorway was. And the big orange lights there, the motorway, and I was able to pick that up in the crystal between the trees or just above the trees, and that gave me some point of reference,
bearing. Yep.
So at least one bearing. Yeah. So from that, I was able to continue the journey. I gather we walked around 17 kilometres that night through the middle of the night, over cliffs and down cliffs, through creeks, the thickest and thickest of bush. Spiders every metre, there'd be a spider. And the other tool I had, by the way, was an industrial blower, a cordless blower. So along the way, I'm able to blow the spiders out of the way, but also I'm able to look at the ground, and without disturbing the ground. As all I was doing is blowing the leaves aside,
Yeah.
And a great tool, Every archaeologist would own a blower, And anyway, so I really looked the sight. I looked like Ghostbusters, you can imagine, with a rucksack and this industrial blower.
It's a little
torches.
crazy. It's a little bit of a crazy story.
Crazy stuff, absolutely crazy, And anyway, but come the dawn, and I had in my mind that at dawn we were going to find this thing. I don't know what it was about dawn. I was thinking Egyptians and sunrise,
Yeah.
And anyway, but dawn came and went, and we never found it. And it was about 20 minutes later. And I was sort of losing patience a bit. The young lady was very difficult. And I can't tell all her story live because she has children.
Absolutely. No, that's fair enough, mate. That's fair enough.
But believe me, she was difficult. And she'd laugh. I hope she'd laugh. Because today we're old friends now.
Yeah.
And but it was certainly a difficult journey, And I remember looking up and saying, "You're testing me, aren't you? Like putting me in this position, Anyway, but a strange thing happened. About 20 minutes after dawn, and I wasn't ever going to show it that I was losing patience, but I really was a bit, And I was feeling like now I'd wasted the opportunity. I come all that way. I've never found this thing, and it was all for nothing. And suddenly she says to me, she goes, "What's that?" Oh, what? And I've looked into the bush, and there was this round object glowing. So the colour of Ayers Rock, that beautiful sunburnt, that ochre colour, appeared in the bush alongside us. Amongst all the dirty browns and greys and deep greens of the bush, there's this glowing rock, And I said, "Oh, I don't know, let's have a look, So we made our way back into the scrub, and we got back to the thing, and it just disappeared before my eyes. And what it was the sunlight coming in over the horizon had already hit the bay, bounced off the bay, through the scrub for miles, and just happened to hit this rock and lit it up. So anyway, I climbed the rock because now we were there, and I ended up falling off the other side of it, and I fell between the walls. And this is me arriving at Bambara, So hit the ground hard, and by the way, I've got an iPod now. I missed it out of the story.
Yeah.
The kids had seen the stress I was under. Father's Day had come and
they get you an iPad.
They bought me an iPad, yeah. And so the iPad, which I had in the rucksack behind me, I quickly pulled out to make sure it wasn't damaged. And when you switch these things on, and you see the screen, and like that, you know.
Yeah.
And you can't miss it. And anyway, so I switched it on, and but it came on pictures or camera, you know. And probably I was using camera moments before, or whatever. But anyway, camera came up, so I'm looking through that screen, and camera's on. And as I pointed it at the wall, I've gone, oh my God! And there in the view screen, of course, is what we see today. You know, the hundreds and hundreds of text. You know, but I pressed the button, I took the photo, and when I took the iPod down, I looked around and I realised, oh my God,
We're here.
we're here. It was that same place where that fellow had brought me. So that thing on the wall, and he's saying, take it, take it. That very one turned out to be his name. So his name was Dee. And so as we learned more about him, and I was able to identify what the texts are at Bambara, he shows up in Egypt, and he's mentioned there. So he's mentioned there as Dee from Djed Snefru, and that's what they called this place. And that's what it said on the wall, Dee of Djed Snefru. That's what he was pointing at that whole time. Take it, take it. So for me now, this is really weird, because all of a sudden here I am, you know, in a place that I was taken to in a visitation. Now, I'm as psychic as a house brick. I really am, you know,
Right,
and
yeah.
I've never been, you know, like interested in that type of woo-woo, you know.
Yeah,
like, you know.
spirituality, that sort
So
of stuff. Yeah.
I'm really struggling with this, you know, like here I am, you know, but it was enough for me to call out, and I said, okay, I get it. You got me here. You know, I said, I don't know what you're doing, why me? You know, like, why me? You know, I don't know what you're doing. I said, but if you want to come out, you know, well, nobody came, you know.
No.
It wasn't about that, it was get me there, you know. And so I knew now, you know, that it was obviously it was a very important reason for this, you know, for me to end up there, you know. So I was going to look at this very seriously. And keep in mind, I'd only looked at, or thought I was looking for a sentence, and now here I am confronted with
Hundreds of them.
500 texts, you know, and many of them I could recognise. You know, that study in ideogram had earned me some value there. And but anyway, as I'm looking, what it was really easy identifiable was the names on the walls. They exist within a cartouche.
Yeah.
So a cartouche is a royal rope which is drawn, and it gives it royal protection, you know. And there was a number of names on the walls. And instantly I recognised them. It was the names Khufu, Snefru, Djed Thor. Well, Dee was there, of course. But what it was that all these names, I knew these names very well, because one papyrus I was using to learn hieroglyph text, called the Westcar Papyrus, it's a papyrus that holds several stories within it. Each of these names on the walls appear within the Westcar Papyrus. It was the same names.
Okay.
And there was none missing off the wall that aren't in the Westcar, and vice versa. And I realised, well, hang on a minute, you know, there's something in this. You know, these things are connected. And that was enough for me to give me the permissions for myself now to want to look further.
Sure.
And that's one of the things I thought about it when I seen what we were looking at here. You know, I thought, well, I better come up with a good reason if I'm going to carry on and want to study this thing, because I don't want to waste my time. As we were talking before, and I was saying that this was an important part in my life.
Yeah.
Our kids were grown, and it was time for Kath and I now, and there was no room for anything else. You know?
Yeah.
And suddenly here's this thing, you know. So it's going to have to be very real for me to give myself permission, you know.
Yeah.
And so I had it in the way that I could recognise that these names were the same names exactly in the Westcar Papyrus. So what's famous about the Westcar is it's the last telling of Khufu that there is. And it tells it the tale of she meets a man called Dee the magician, or Dee the Magi. And she and what it is that one of her family, Djed Thor, in a conversation with Khufu, trying to entertain her, you know, says, look, I can tell you a story of the greatest magician in the world, and he's still alive today. On hearing the story, Khufu says, wow, go get the guy, bring him here. And this is the ruler, so you can't say no to the ruler, especially Khufu. There was an actual law. You couldn't say no to Khufu.
Yeah, right.
And so poor Djed Thor, he's going, oh my God, you know, I've got to go get Dee, you know, like, that's on the other side of the world. But apparently he did. As the Westcar tells the story, he came then to the land of Djed Snefru and talked to Dee and said, look, you know, the ruler, has invited you back there, and she promises to build a memorial there for your ancestors, and as a reward. And this is a very important thing. We went looking for this thing, of course, and found it there, in Egypt. Because they wouldn't make a promise and not complete it,
Yeah.
And anyway, so Dee Dee has left Australia, gone over there, and it tells in the Westcar that then Khufu had said to Dee Dee, "You know the numbers of the chambers of Thoth, don't you?" And he said, "Well, yes, I do." He said, "I don't know the numbers, however, I do know where they're kept, and they're kept within a box of flint there where he comes from, Well, the box of flint turned out to be Lion Island, because that's the makeup of the geology of the Sydney Basin area.
Right.
And the island is flint, And anyway, but so in the Westcar it tells that they get on the boat and they leave Egypt, and that's where the Westcar stops. So it just suddenly cuts off mid-sentence. So the Westcar papyrus has been famous for that it's the most sought-after deal to find the missing end of the Westcar papyrus, assuming it just fell off or something, was lost in antiquity. And so to find the other end, the missing conclusion of the Westcar. And the other thing about the Westcar is those several stories in it, although it's known to be an artefact from those days, the thing is that they don't know that the stories were about fiction or were they about truth. So the goal of literature has been to find some fact to the Westcar, and another goal has been to find the other end of the missing conclusion to the Westcar. So what I realised standing there, even though I couldn't read all the text as yet, that was going to take some time.
You recognised enough symbols.
It was the other end of the Westcar papyrus. Where the Westcar cuts off, and Bambara, it goes back into the Westcar, starts again, and finishes the story. It was the other end of the Westcar papyrus. And I knew then I've got something,
Yeah.
And to really prove it to myself, to make it, you couldn't doubt it, so irrefutable was this, that on the walls there's a royal lineage, so it's 3 rulers' names on the wall. So you see this a lot in Egypt, And what it was, it gave the name Snefru, who was the ruler before Khufu, and then it gives Khufu. But the next one was the word Ratosis. Have you ever heard of Ratosis?
No.
Nobody has, I had, by sheer chance, in that trying to learn hieroglyphs, reading those encyclopedias, my general knowledge growing, I chanced upon Ratosis. So who Ratosis was the king after Khufu. His name was Djedefre. But like me, I'm Colin James Andrew Hayter. They were the same. They had many names. Khufu was Khufu, Meritites, Henetsen, Medju. And so Djedefre, the ruler after Khufu, one of his other names was the name Ratosis. So it was his priestly name. As in, say, Andrew is my priestly name in the way when I was a kid and I was confirmed through the Catholic religion, at age 10 you go for a confirmation and they give you a name of a saint, So that was, Andrew was mine. For him, Ratosis was his. So what they'd done there, when they made this royal trilogy on the walls at Bambara, Djedefre wasn't king yet. Khufu had only just died. And a ruler rules after death for 72 days. It's not until they're placed into their eternal resting place, now the next ruler takes on. So when they made this trilogy, they very clever and accurately, instead of giving Djedefre his king name, his throne name, they used his spiritual name, because it would have been wrong protocol. He wasn't a king yet, so they couldn't write that.
So that gives you an accurate timestamp then, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
So
within days.
Where does it date back to?
It dates back to the year 2566 BC, in the year June. And that year. So 4,587 years ago now.
Yeah.
Long time. It's a very long time. And so what happened was... well, that was the light, coming on. So at that stage, I was 55 when that happened to me. I'm 62 now.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting thing, as learning grew, and I got to know Djedthor really well, the one that's named on the wall there that came there with Didi. He was the one that came and got him, took him back to Egypt. The brother of Djedfree, mentioned before. So Djedthor. As I got to know him, he turned out to be the most prolific and the earliest published writer on earth. He wrote many books. He wrote things called An Ode to My Son by Djedthor, which was advices to his son. When he left Egypt to come to Australia, he didn't think he was going to survive it. So he wrote a series of informations to help his boy get through life without him being there. So it became published as an Ode of Djedthor, or the Ode to My Son by Djedthor. He wrote another one called Your Embalmer is Your Best Friend. And he was an embalmer. And he knew his stuff, because he's the guy that's buried Khufu here in Australia. And she died a terrible death. And the things it took to save her soul, further in the story as we talk more, but this guy was the best of the best of the best. She was so lucky to have him there that day. So when he wrote your embalmer is your best friend, he was writing it from very good experience. So once again, Djedthor is the earliest and most prolific writer out from antiquity. So when he wrote of these days today, and he wrote about these very days. He wrote about the day that guy would turn up there at Bambara. He called him the one who will read from stone. And it turns up far, far into our future. When he talked of it, he said this. He said, make sure that man is 50 plus 1/2 again, no less. 55. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And but I didn't know that at the time. This is later as learning's growing, and I'm learning more of Djedthor and how he thought and wrote, and I'm reading that, And so there's something about that 55, And never think you're over the hill or something like that. If you get towards 50 and think I've missed out on life, because I was, I was thinking that we did a great job raising the kids and everything, but I'm sure I was destined for a greater thing than this,
Yeah.
At 50, I've missed my opportunity,
Yeah.
But apparently not, apparently according to Djedthor, 55 is the, that age when you can grasp whatever it's going to take,
Yeah.
as it did. So that's how it came about, and how I fell into the Bambara Incident. And we call it the Bambara Incident because it's a big incident. It wasn't just a single discovery.
No.
What happened there that day? First, we got to learn that about it was the other end of the West Car. That was the first thing, But as the learning went on, what we learned there was able to shine light on a very great many major discoveries that were going to pale the Bambara 100 times over. And so today when we talk about what happened on the 11th of the 11th in 2014 at 11 o'clock, by the way, funny how that goes, the Bambara incident took place and Colin Hayter fell between the walls, and there we were, And ask me a question, give me a break.
Fair enough, mate. Look, that you've barely taken a breath, mate. Have a drink.
Yeah.
Look, there's so much information there to take in.
There is.
I suppose only because of the rabbit hole I've been down recently. It's probably a pretty big question to pull your string again. However, what do the glyphs tell us? What is that story?
They tell a story of a great sharing that happened there. And what it was Khufu was coming here, as she tells in the West Car Papyrus, because they wanted to copy the measurements of the house of Thoth, the numbers of Thoth, the house of God to them, And so she wanted to do that. But what happened, as it tells on the walls, was that there was a terrible accident. There was a massive storm, and there was 2 ships, and both ships turned upside down. Khufu was killed. But so what we see there is just 200 metres further up is the tomb for Khufu. Under her name Henetsen, Khufu Henetsen Medju Meritites as her names, and they use the name Henetson there. But to understand what happened there between the walls takes understanding Khufu. So about Khufu, it goes like this. Most people thought Khufu was a bloke.
Yeah, I'm loving letting you tell your story, but every time you say she and Khufu,
the real thing is there's no evidence Khufu was ever a bloke. There exists none. There's not one piece of evidence anyway.
Okay.
So how we come to that as a part conclusion at the moment comes from Petrie. So Petrie was one of the early granddaddies of Egyptology that toiled away there in the 1900s.
Yeah, Petrie. Yes. Yeah.
So Petrie found a 6-inch statue that they call the statue of Khufu. And the thing was that he found half a statue. And so he put a price on for anybody to find the other half. A week later, somebody went, "Oh, I've got half," and there was a second half. And but the thing is that Petrie then placed it together, glued it together himself in his own premises, and professed it to be, as Khufu. The thing is, it doesn't have Khufu's name on it. It doesn't say Khufu on it at all. It has a part of the name Medju on it, the Khufu's spiritual name. But other people had that name as well. It wasn't direct. It wasn't a throne name.
Yeah, Medju's a common.
Common, yeah. It's a priestly name. And
that's where I know it from the priest stuff. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So what happened was somehow, for the great influence that the British had at the time, attest anything to anything. Their testing went through, breaking all the records. So where that half a statue was found, and then later the other half, was in a place where it had nothing to do with Fourth Dynasty. So if you find an artifact, and you wanted to test it, it's got to meet a number of principles. It's got to be found in an area that's to do with that particular dynasty. Other than that, it's got to have clear text, to be able to understand. You can't just make it up,
Yeah, or different style hieroglyphs from different dynasties, etc. Different understandings.
Got to be in one piece.
Yeah.
And but so with the Khufu statue, all the rules were broken. It was renovated back together out from Department of Antiquity eyes. They should have done that. Instead, it was done in a tent by Petrie, and so it could have been two halves of anything,
Yeah.
and he's put it together, And so anyway, that 6-inch statue is the only evidence of Khufu being a man, and everybody just went along. And so what we notice there at Bambara is it tells more than once on the walls, Khufu girl. Every time it says Khufu, it says girl.
Okay.
And that was one of the first things I noticed. And what I did with that was when I first noticed that was new to me too, And even studying the Westcar Papyrus, I thought Khufu was a man. I never knew Khufu was a girl. This is the first time I'm seeing it. And so anyway, when I made the video between the walls that first day, it was made in an emergency. That place was about to be bulldozed over. There was only days to go. And while I'm talking in that video, there's people knocking pegs and things in the ground, not too far off, and a bulldozer in the car park working his way down the track. So it was only days to go, and it was all over. And so in the video on the 11th, when I announced Bambara to the world, I did something very clever. I'm so glad I did it. Even though I knew it said Khufu was a girl and there was a number of other things there, you couldn't reference them at the time. And I didn't have the knowledge either to be able to demonstrate them, So I deliberately dumbed it down. If a person listening to me couldn't, with their telephone, reference everything I said, I wasn't going to say it. And now I've said that, if you ever watch that video, you'll see me talking and I'll suddenly hesitate and I'm like trying to stop myself because that bit can't be referenced so easily like that.
Yeah.
So I was narrowing down the size of the arena to have to defend from. And until I learned the knowledge to be able to take things further.
Because at that point you didn't have the complete understanding.
I didn't have much at all, really. Yeah,
okay.
I didn't have much. But I knew it was certainly connected to the Westcar. I was able to demonstrate that very easily,
Only because of the references you'd already seen and what you were studying to learn the language.
Yep, and it's there. I could point to it,
Yeah.
So stuff like Khufu being a girl, I never mentioned it. Just left it clean out, and I went along with talking as if just she was a man, you know. And but what, like, you know, as we look to Egypt now and we read everything we can there on the walls about Khufu, there too it tells every single time Khufu girl, after her name all the way through. It never says she was a man. It was just Petrie made that wrong conclusion, and everybody went along with it. And so the important thing...
So much of our ancient history is some bloke saying, hey, this is it.
Well, mate, I could kick their asses, I tell you. I really could, you know. But the thing is, it doesn't win you any points pointing to the granddaddies of Egyptology and suggesting they made mistakes.
No, it doesn't. No,
it doesn't win you anything.
The narrative is too ingrained there.
Yeah, but I'll go further than that and say I'd kick Petrie's ass if he turned up in front of me now. I would. But what happened was this, you know, Petrie, greatly he was sponsored by the Vatican. Yeah. And
surprise.
Yeah. And what it was the Vatican, they probably would like to have another go today, you know, a lot of religions do this. They try to create a place deeper in antiquity for their religion to give it a more ancient credibility.
They also tend to build their modern temples on top of ancient temples.
Exactly, yeah. And so there in Egypt, they were looking for Moses, you know. And greatly they seen it that Tutmosis IV was their Moses. And he's going to be the guy, you know. And so Petrie, he being sponsored by the Vatican, he was responsible to them, you know, to stick to this Catholic line, as it were, you know, and find Moses. And so what they did was, you know, with Tutmosis being, you know, their head man for that, you know, there in Giza exists called King Menkaure, Djedefo. So Djedefo, who did the glyphs down there at Bambara, his full name once again is Djedefo Tamphus Menkaure Baka. That's his names. And anyway, so as Tamphus, the spelling of that looks an awful lot like Tutmosis. It's not exactly the same, but pretty close. It's about 7 out of 10 for closeness, you know, but certainly not 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
So what they did, all of the works of Tamphus, King Menkaure in 4th dynasty, building Giza there, the Sphinx and all those things, you know, they attested to Tutmosis IV. All of it. And Tamphus disappeared out of history. And nobody knows who Tamphus is. The 3 great pyramids, the Khufu, the Khafre, the Menkaure. Menkaure, that's him. His name is Djedefo Tamphus Menkaure. And they wiped him out. They took him out of history and put Tutmosis there instead. So on the Sphinx stela, the dream stela in front of the Sphinx, there it says directly on it, Menkaure Tamphus. And somehow they changed that, you know, and made that into Tutmosis instead, a ruler that wouldn't live for another 1,200 years yet, you know.
Yeah, right.
And so in this way they ripped us off, you know, and to assume Khufu a bloke, you know, like that, and so they made some very, very big mistakes. So Champollion, the Rosetta Stone. You know, it was him, of course, that translated the Dream Stela. He translated the Dream Stela years before they found the Rosetta Stone. So if they learned Egyptian hieroglyphs from the Rosetta, how the heck did he translate the Dream Stela in the first place? And
that's a good point.
With what, you know? And so, you know, again, towing the line of the Vatican, the French were the same, you know. They attested everything to Tutmosis and completely wiped out Tamphus. And terrible, terrible tragedy, you know. So Champollion lined him up with Petrie. I'll kick his ass too, you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm really annoyed by it. I really am, because it's cultural theft. You know, what the theft to Egypt, to the children of Egypt, you know, that was their passed down stories, and these guys changed them for the sake of an agenda that didn't work. Because, by the way, not all Egyptologists agreed with this, you know.
Yeah, right.
And so there was a lot of friction on the Giza Plateau between the Russians, the Germans, the French, and the British, and so on. Those not towing the Vatican line, they're saying, hey, you can't say that, you can't attest that, you know, that's not right. So a fight of tit for tat broke out.
Yeah.
And so Mariette, who had found the inventory stela in the Temple of Isis there in Giza,
Yeah.
right underneath the foot of the Great Pyramid. So the inventory stela tells about Lion Island, about Bambara, all that stuff, as clear as day. If you know the story of Bambara, then you read the inventory stela, you go, oh yeah, I get it. But of course, not knowing Bambara and looking at the inventory stela, you don't know what the heck it's talking about, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's an artifact from 4th Dynasty. Again, it was Djedeford that wrote the thing, you know. But in this tit for tat arguing, when they said you're a fraud to about the, well, not about the Rosetta, but to Champollion and to Petrie, you know, like you're a fraud. Then they pointed to Mariette's finders of the inventory stele and said, no, you're a fraud. That's a fraud. And today, you know, like 100+ years later,
It's still known as a fraud.
It's still known as a fraud. Yeah,
isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and of course it wasn't. You know, it was an actual artifact found in place, undisturbed. You know, so you can't say it wasn't. You know, it wasn't somebody put it there. You know, and but so as I say, yeah, not all Egyptologists went along with this ideal. You know,
but the British was law back then, basically.
They had big guns. The biggest, you know, yeah, and their fleet was sitting in the harbour.
And they've created the story of history that is still taught in our schools today.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, and this is the...
Yeah, but did they do it deliberately? You know, well, kind of. The thing was, though, that they didn't know. Because, you know, when Petrie wiped out Tamfus, he didn't know Tamfus was either. Yeah. He was doing that thing of, you know, when you're on an agenda, you only see what it is that you first set out to find, you know. Yeah. And he was looking for Tutmosis, and that's what he got, you know. So a lot of it wasn't deliberate as such as it was that they just didn't know, you know.
So, I mean, all this information is awesome, and I actually
wonderful,
can't. I can't. Sitting here at the time, I'm struggling to assimilate it all at once. I'm going to listen back to this one and I'm going to have a good think about it, and I'm sure I'm going to have 1,000 more questions.
Yeah.
You seem to be very confident on the timeline.
Yes.
So...
It's astronomy. 3142 BC, the polar stars moving is what it is. Yeah. And then recorded, you know, in India so well.
The North Star used to, and see, I've been trying to remember the North Star the whole time we've been talking. It used to be the Dog Star, wasn't it, back then?
No.
No, I've gone again.
Polaris.
Polaris, that's right. I feel like an idiot. I feel like
you can edit them bits out.
No, I don't edit anything.
I should have helped you before and said what it was.
But so, Göbekli Tepe, right? Have you looked into Göbekli Tepe?
A great deal. Yeah.
So, Göbekli Tepe is proven to be 11,500 years old. And that is they're aligned to the old North Star as well. Some of the enclosures in there are
not surprised.
Yeah. So I mean, from one of the big questions we talk about in this room, just to steer off the topic, because I'm curious to get. You sort of palmed off the ability to actually carve these stones. Do you think there was because obviously that's a massive undertaking. Like, so if we take your story you've told us tonight, right, and you know you can see Richard has a brilliant picture of standing on the Stonehenge site looking at Mount Warning, and it looks like the 3 pyramids of Giza, right? And to recreate that on that scale, it's hard for me to imagine chisels doing that, right? It just because of the absolute precision and the fact, you know, there's guys like Chris Dunn taking modern engineering equipment, and like the precision it would be hard to achieve today with modern equipment, right? Do you think that is history that misconstrued that we don't understand those people back then? Or
certainly,
or did the Egyptians have a level of technology we don't understand when this story was created?
Well, we can only look to India and see what they use, and it's definitely hand tools that they use. You know, they're not using anything they're not using lasers or anything, highly technical.
Yeah.
And they create things like that, and so what it is people tend to doubt humans.
Yes.
I don't know why they do that.
Oh yeah, like everything's aliens. Yeah. I definitely believe it's
they do,
us. I'm not concerned.
Yeah, they just doubt humans all the time. To say like we couldn't build Giza today. Well, of course we can. We can build anything today. But still, we say things like that, and really mean it. And we just doubt humans so much. It's sad that we do. And I guess now that we can find very clear indicators telling us a lot more about our ancestors, hopefully it'll help overcome that. And maybe will give us a little bit more faith in ourselves.
Yeah, well, I think, I've been like, I don't, I've never begrudged anyone of their religion, Colin. However, I learned within myself many years ago, in my early 20s, that it's faith in yourself that you must have.
You must.
That's where the power is.
That's where it begins.
Yeah.
Yeah. But have faith in those ancestors too. And they're stronger than you and I. All working together. Have faith in those. So talking about biblical, earlier when we were talking about the initiation there at Lion Island, Muddy, the Virgin Mother, the three wise men coming over the horizon. So, of course, we know that story from the Bible, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah. And
so it makes you wonder then what other stories, passed down stories from deep time, also appear in the Bible.
Well, look, I my interpretation of a lot of... I haven't read the Bible in a long time. I chewed my way through it in my early 20s because I thought I had to, just to be able to sort of read the text.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting now, though, and a friend of mine echoes this, that I pick the Bible up now and it's gobbledygook.
Yep.
But I remember reading it and understanding it at the time. But if I pick it up now, it didn't flow as it did once then. And I suppose maybe the words have already sunk in or whatever it is. However, I do think what I've been learning in this room, whether it be by myself conducting research or talking with, guests like yourself, it's like they were telling us a story that echoes through time, and it may not be myth, it may be truth wrapped in story.
But unfortunately with the Bibles, all of them, from the Quran to the Torah for the Jew, and the Bible for the Christian, the only evidence of anything in them is what's written in them. There's never actually been any evidence. Well, that's about to change. It really is. Being able to reconnect Australian passed down stories into those stories of the Bible opens up the whole new thing, So what happened with the Bible, it was very much like why the Bambara text could never be understood. So I'll go back to Bambara for that. Why it couldn't be understood was it's written in what's called Proto-Egypt ideogram. Yeah. So every symbol isn't a letter, it's a meaning behind the depiction behind the image, and an ideogram. And so ideograms were thought to be used as just casual incursions into otherwise alphabetical sentences. Yeah. What wasn't known was that ideograms could be used to write entire sentences, phrases, in fact, entire stories. And that's why ideogram until 2014 still couldn't be read. It was just assumed. I don't know why somebody assumed that, but somebody did, and we all just followed along, So ideograms were known, and they fit into our sign list. So actually there, if you get a book of sign list, Hiero sign list, you'll see the alphabetical, the phono, like how we believe it sounded, and then you'll see the ideogram alongside. And so at Bambara, what we did there was, it wasn't like we had to recreate a lost language. We just had to use our known sign list more responsibly. And that opened up everything. So the Bible turns out to be the same in the way that many of the words in the Bible still carry through from its earliest origins as a writing. And it's fair to say it was the Hebrew that first wrote those things, the way that we see them today into a modern Bible.
And the ancient Hebrew, correct me if I'm wrong, they were ideograms as well. Like a symbol was a letter and a number at the same time.
Yeah. But when it's gone into English, things changed. So the word David, for example, the name David, it's not a name at all. It wasn't originally. That's the term for beloved uncle.
Okay.
Jonathan, again, wasn't a name in those days.
That's interesting. My uncle's name's David.
Is that right? Yeah. Beloved uncle. Yes. And it's really interesting that it's uncle, in the way that, I'm an uncle upon a sovereign panel, and we have uncles in that way. He's a beloved uncle. And so Jonathan wasn't a name. It's the term a gift from God. Bathsheba. So Bathsheba was the wife of Solomon. And so it too wasn't a name. The Hebrew word Bathsheba is a promise made by God, or the Creator. It doesn't say God. A promise made by the Creator. So when we look at the Bible now and look at the names and realise they're not actually names, when we look at a term of something that says, John was delivered to David, really what that's saying is, a gift from God was delivered to the beloved uncle.
Right.
So it's not names. It's not two people, And so knowing that, researching the Bible, taking all those names aside, and then researching the actual Hebrew word of what those names used to mean,
and unpacking them in the ideogram that they actually are.
Yep. Totally changes things.
Yeah.
It totally changes it.
Don't they mean numbers as well, mate? Is that true?
Numbers?
As well?
Yeah. How do you mean?
Hebrew was the letters were also numbers as well.
Well, keep in mind the earliest writing was numeric.
Yeah, it was the picked the dashes in the stone.
That's right. Yeah. So the number on the east coast, if I talk this language here, when I say that, we're in Queensland now. We're on Yugara lands where we're sitting.
Yeah.
But if we go back down to Bambara, number one is Mal, M-A-A-L, which means a beginning, a first, the creator. So always that first business, Two is Bulla. Have you been to Fiji?
No, I've been to Fiji.
If you go to Fiji, when you walk in a room, Fijian goes, oh, Bulla, their way of saying hello. But what it is breath. So, when you walk into a room and you breathe new life into the room and everybody smiles.
Yes.
Bulla, breath. So, same for Australian traditional on the East Coast. Bulla means breath, air, wind. Three is the words Yuli Angala, which means the dark, and or parting the dark. So it can be like a rainy day and the sun comes out. Oh, Yuli Angala. And so this is called numeric. So numeric ideogram was the written language that Australian custodians used through all of time. So we see it in pictures and carvings, and we'll see stripes alongside or dots and so on. And many traditional artists still understood a great many of them. So they appear in even modern traditional art. But the thing was that as a written language, it had been lost. And so it was always rumoured that at one point in early colonial times, Chief Boni, B-O-N-I, so he's a Gomeroi chief. And he had seen, so this is 1830, I believe, so really early. 1770 was Cook, of course. 1786 the first convicts.
Very early on,
yeah. And so around that time, the first colonists are arriving.
That's
the free men,
Yeah.
And but
book around here, 1835, I think it's
right. Yeah. So Chief Boni, he'd already realised what was going on. That the teaching was cut off, and already by then people were dying all around them. And people were being, moved off their custodial lands, and so he did something very, very clever. What it was there was a woman who was the wife of the first magistrate here in Australia, the first travelling magistrate. And so she was his secretary, well-educated woman. And as well as, at times she was probably the defence or something in court, because only him and her travelling around.
Yeah.
But the thing was that she made excellent and easy friends with the women in culture. All women are sisters, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah.
and more so than the men, you know. And so she was doing some marvellous things in the way that she was taking traditional music and writing it into piano music and so on, and vice versa. She was taking European music and turning it into traditional Australian music. And so what one telling of her, or related to her, came from a group of workmen who were returning back from work, and they walked past a group of traditional guys, Indigenous people, sitting in a circle, singing "Happy Birthday to You" in their language.
Right.
And so it was such a remarkable thing that it got a mention, you know.
Yeah.
But this is her, you know, doing that business of swapping them over. So Chief Bonai, anyway, seeing her as a good thing, asked her to do something for him. And so what they did was they translated Murray Gwelder into writing. And but the thing was, it was lost. So it was always a rumour that had happened, you know, but where did it go? You know, so near 200 years now it had been lost. So we went looking for it. So when I say we, I'm not alone in all this, you know.
Yeah.
In fact, there's tens of thousands of Australian traditional people behind me. But greatly is my research assist, Megan Porter. And she's a proud Gomeroi girl, university trained as a researcher. So she can research for a chemist or a politician, but she dedicated a great deal of her time, and still does today, to me and this cause, to reconnect, you know, the stories. And so Megan has easy access through her education, you know, into the archives of the universities and so on. But importantly is Canberra National Library and so on. So in the search looking for this Murray Gwelder, you know, this writing that had been done by this fabulous woman, we were able to find it. And we found it greatly in the Canberra archives, but other than that, also in local historical societies. There would be little pieces here and there. And we were able to place it back together again. And now we have that again, where we can look at paintings 30, 40,000 years old and see that writing alongside. And now we can read it again. And that's been one of those major discoveries. I was saying that paled Bambara in the first place, you know, paled it a hundredfold over since, you know.
Be interesting to use that to decipher some of the Australian Stonehenge documents, or the Lightning Place documents.
Well, we did.
Okay.
Those we read years ago.
Yeah.
I did try to explain that to Richard. I actually set up a meeting with Richard after talking with him at one of his lectures one time. And I was given permissions to tell Richard of Murray Gwelder and what it was, the stone thread. Unfortunately, Richard got busy after his event that he'd hosted. You know, there was a lot of people wanted to speak to him, you know, and what have you, and he missed the appointment. I waited for 3 hours and eventually went home. And next time I sat with those elders and they say, "How did he take that? Did he learn?" I said, "No, he didn't show." And so it was rescinded, and so I never gave him that information. But if he would have just turned up, you know, and what I had for him was all the documents there, and you can have that. But it's important to honour the journey, you know, and God bless him. God bless him, you know. But
maybe we can get permission, because that's part of the research that we're doing now. I'm
I'll say
very deep in that hole.
Yeah. So I support Richard greatly, you know, and. But it's important to listen to culture. Yeah, it's their story. It's not our story. It becomes our story in the way that the ancestors are our shared ancestors. So they're my ancestors too. You know, so it does give me permission to want to seek these people out and learn more of them, because they are my family as well. You know, just because I was born on the other side of the planet doesn't mean that those ancestors here aren't my ancestors. You know, they're our shared ancestors. And but it's important to as those here, you know, holding the ancient knowledge, you know, to listen to those. And I urge all everybody working in antiquities, you know, in paleo studies, that they really need to study culture.
It's a big part of it is anthropology, isn't it? It's a big part of it.
That's right. And unfortunately, anthropologists don't. Archaeologists don't. Egyptologists don't. Nobody does. You know? But when I say you've got to study culture, you can't study Australian Aboriginal culture. You've got to become Well, you can't research it.
You got to be accepted. Yeah.
You got to be a student of it.
Yeah.
You know, a good one.
Yeah.
A good listener. You know.
Yeah.
And that was my advantage. Was, you know, early in the piece when we released Bambara, its story on the walls, and it went to a great part in saving Bambara. A very great part.
Where is it at now, though? Aren't they threatening it again?
No, they're threatening the block next door.
Okay.
But that bigger part of Bambara I mentioned, it's still part of it.
It's still part of it.
Yeah, it's still part of it. Yeah. And but it's not that particular place there that we focus on for the sake of the glyphs, you know. But for me, when I released that information, and I was quickly picked up by culture, and it wasn't to pat me on the back, you know. It was to remind me that I wasn't listening. I haven't listened to them yet. Yeah.
Right.
I was fortunate in the way that I'd listened to that visitor I got, that visitation, when Dee came to my home personally himself, you know. That obviously I'd listened, you know, and realised that there was something divine going on here, you know.
Yes.
But now it was time for me to learn from culture. And so seeing that this job, I call it a job, you know, that this divine journey that I'd been set upon, you know, was extremely important.
The calling, mate, the calling.
Yeah, well, it was. There was no doubt about it. You know, no doubt about it.
You're sitting in my calling, mate. This is
yes, yeah. So country and culture came to me pretty quickly, you know, and I got a very good education. You know, I really did. They did a good job on me.
Yeah.
But greatly, you know, I was taught to read pictogram, so cave painting and carving and so on, which is the oldest form of language on earth, you know, of written language, talking out of paints on walls, and of course taught greatly, you know, of culture story. So I became a student of culture, not a researcher of culture.
Yes.
Yeah, it really took that, you know.
I find, and it's interesting, yes, that's an interesting term that you use it like that, Colin, because obviously I spent many years over in Papua New Guinea.
Oh, right.
And I spent some time in New Zealand, and I hadn't thought about it in those terms till you put it like that. However, I've been readily accepted, and even in Arnhem Land. So I have Indigenous down both sides of my generation, my mother's and my father's side. And even the white side of my father's side, we're fifth generation Australian. Yeah. However, before I knew all that, when I was in Nhulunbuy in Gove in the Northern Territory, we played football. You know, so they have 6 Indigenous teams, 1 white team, and those 6 Indigenous teams represent individual tribes.
Yes.
And instead of going to war with each other, they play footy against each other on the weekend.
Yeah.
And through me playing football, AFL, I earned their respect.
Yeah.
And it was for no other reason that I was firm but fair on the football field. Like, I would hit them hard and they would hit me hard, but I would help them up and they would help me up.
Yeah.
It was I earned their respect, and through that was invited onto the land that you can't go.
Yeah.
And we went crabbing and we built a spear and actually talked to a clever man out there. It was one of the most interesting experiences of my life. And I've told this story on the podcast before, but I'd like to tell you, because I'm only a teenager, Colin. I'm 16,
yes.
Right? And my curiosity back then was like, why didn't the Indigenous use the wheel? Why didn't, you're so old, why didn't you use the wheel? And he was very matter of fact. He said,
I can imagine what he said.
He said 2 things. He said to me that we love the land. We like to be connected to the land.
Yeah.
And every journey is its own reward, basically, is how he sort of described it to me.
Learning is in the journey.
Yeah. And then he said, and as for, and this is something that still blows my mind today, and as for sacred places, there is caves around Australia. You walk in one cave, because we're in the Northern Territory. He's like, you go to Jabiru, there's a special cave there. You walk in that cave, you come out in the Grampians. In Victoria. And he just said it so matter-of-factly. And, that speaks to, you were talking about interdimensional stuff earlier on tonight and those sorts of things, They had there was an understanding of whether it be energy, vibration, whatever it is, that we cannot grasp today, that they had, and it's a
Have.
They have. Okay, yeah. Well, this is yeah. And it's if you are a student of culture, that's a very good way to put it, because I've been readily accepted into a number of different cultures because I go in humbly and I just want to listen.
Listen is the key.
Like tonight, I haven't said very much tonight because I was very keen just to listen to your story.
Yeah, thank you for your listening.
No, it's okay. Yeah. It's okay. It's as I say, I need to go back and have another listen so I can fully grasp
listening was my first lesson given.
Yeah,
it really was, and it was harsh too. You know, I mean, it was really forced into me. Listen, shouted at me. If I hadn't learned to appreciate that lesson, there wouldn't have been a lesson number 2. You know? Because you had to learn to listen first. You know?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So, country, the way they appreciate you is through your efforts. You could talk all day, but it's not about talking.
Well, it's exactly like I said. The only way that I earned those boys' respect, was
your actions.
Them playing their playing their sons on the football field, and them being there watching me play, caused me to be invited. And that was you'll love this. I got dropped off at an intersection, and basically I was told I could bring my smokes, but I couldn't bring a camera, I couldn't bring anything else.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And basically got dropped in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And they come and pick me up, and I spent, 3 days, 2 nights, 3 days out there with them on country. And I'll never, ever forget that. And,
that's good.
That is part of the calling that led me here. It's like, okay, there's all these megalithic societies around the world. What is going on in Australia? Where did it come from? What are we actually talking about? We look at all these manner of things, mate. Well, listen, but I think let's wrap this session up.
Sure.
I think this is your first podcast, like we said. I don't think it's your last one. There's plenty more to talk about. Well, how do we finish? Because if I ask you a question, we'll start again. So the Bambara incident, Colin falling in between the stones, and look, we only just brushed upon the glyphs. I know you palmed us off to exactly what it said. That was well done there. I do want
a sharing. In that place, it's a sharing place.
Yeah,
it was a healing too.
Yeah.
Because I didn't get to finish telling you about Khufu, did I? I was saying that you got to know Khufu to understand. Yes. So maybe we leave the total story of Khufu for next time, because I think we're a couple of hours in. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, mate. Have you got? It's obviously you've been on an accelerated journey, literally around the planet in 7 years.
I have. Yeah.
Okay. Have you the knowledge? And we haven't even touched on what you saw in Egypt or anything like that. There's so many different questions that I have for you.
Yeah.
Is there a message you could share with the listeners, to finish the first installment of the story?
Well, yeah, I'd like to allow us all to know that right now we're in a brand new day. And it was well talked of, through the decades of one day, we would all wake up and so on. We're there. Yes. This is it. There's no more waiting for tomorrow.
No, I've been trying to say this on this podcast, that we actually are in prophetic times right now.
We're there right now.
Yeah.
The ancients prophesied that, I don't think it was through magic as much as it was through their preparation, that they deliberately prepared, leaving the clues around the planet for this day to come about.
Mate, this podcast is dedicated to trying to read those clues.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a lot of them, I can tell you. Yeah. They really went right out of their way. Dijed, he was, probably the greatest manufacturer of those clues. Leaving them all over Egypt, all over the world. So we are there, so it's time to claim that waking up. Not wake up, we're already woken up, It's time to claim it now. And as you hear more of what's unfolded from Bambara, seek out that information, that's happened. The answers are in that. If I can speak for Thoth, which is Dijed 4 again, it's him at the end of the day, same fella. he said it this way, in the way that the keys are in the images he left upon the walls.
If we could understand the symbolism, we would awaken ourselves beyond all measure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the code. Is that, is the keys are in the images upon the walls.
Absolutely.
And now we can read ideogram again, and now we can read Murray Guelder, Australian Aboriginal text, again. This is what he was talking about, So truly wonderful things just ahead. Absolutely, truly wonderful things. The mood outside in the world, because here in Australia we're slow to pick up.
Yes.
In Egypt, the mood is electric over this.
Yes.
In India, the same as well.
Yeah.
For India, it means for them that they're passed on stories that got so complicated that they lost the plot. It's just, you seen Bollywood. Well, that's what their stories are like.
Yeah.
And Bollywood's Pakistan, isn't it? But just they're all very much the same. They exaggerated so much they all lost the plot. So they've got it back. And so the mood is just absolutely electric in Egypt and India. It's only in Australia where it is for some reason. We prefer to have mysteries. We don't want answers.
Some of us do, mate. Some of us do.
Well, yeah. But there's an industry exists, for mysteries. It's a very productive and profitable game. Mysteries. They outsell history books by 100-fold to 1.
Yeah,
and
right.
Let's have more mysteries. So there's an industry that will even make mysteries up where there aren't any.
Yes.
So anyway, truly wonderful things ahead. We are there now. I ask everybody to turn their eyes and ears to the south, just as Egypt and India are, and listen closely over what's being told now, what's unfolded. So coming behind me isn't just me. I represent the greatly for the telling of the story on the walls of Bambara. I represent Australian traditional peoples greatly. And behind me, that term of there's 30,000 warriors standing right behind you. Well, it's never been more apt than in my case, and in this journey that I'm on. So look, be open to hearing. Go looking for it. Over this last 7 years, I used social media as the tool. It was the only tool I had. But I deliberately placed into those things, into every picture, in the comment sections, I deliberately placed into there all the informations one would need. I did that for a number of reasons. It's like a library. It's there, But if something would have happened to me in that time, or might yet, all that information is there.
Yeah.
And I deliberately placed it. That was a lesson I got from Dijedfor in there, deliberately placing things all over the place.
Yeah, well, it all goes through time. Well, I'll get your Facebook links and that off you, so we can put that in there so everyone can have a look at it.
Yeah. And, I'm easy to find, and I'm a prolific writer, so there's a lot in there, in this last 7 years. And thank you for all those listening, taking this time.
Yeah.
And I look forward to explaining more. And there's a lot more.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look forward to sitting down again soon, mate.
Yeah, today we just scratched the surface.
I can understand. I know that. As I say, today you filled a story in for me that I'd been trying to piece together. I think that's very important. And from that, I can build more questions.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, mate. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, buddy.
Look forward to sitting down again soon. Good on you, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Well done.
We're over 2 hours in. Man.
Have I burned out? Have I blackened the ground? Will I fight back, find my strength again? Days have been gold, tomorrow losing their shine. Will I give up? I doubt it. I never turn to the bottle my world comes crashing down, I get right back up. I take the brunt, I walk out of the road. Have I burned out? Have I blackened the ground? Will I fight back, find my strength again? Days have been gold, but tomorrow losing their shine. Will I give up? I doubt it. I never turn to the bottom to wash away the demons in my mind. I stood up and knocked them down. And if you wanna take me out, you need more than both your barrels to shoot me down. 'Cause now I am tough. Have I burned out? Have I blackened the ground? Will I fight back, find my strength again? Days have been gold, but tomorrow losing their shine. Will I give up? I doubt it. Will I give up? I doubt it. Will I give it all away? No